you check the children. Show a little match sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes. That is what
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird.
Long days and pleasant nights. I'm Jaime and Fuego.
That's right. We are back for, I think this is part 7 of the Stephen King novel tier list ranking. I think we did 5 parts originally, and then
We did it by decades.
catch up.
Yeah, because we did 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and then we did the new, so 6. So yeah, this is 7. So this
will
is
be
like
7.
yeah, this is going to be the most concise sort of catch up because since the last one of these that we did, King has only put out 3 books. He does have here in 2024 a new release that is set for May entitled "You Like It Darker." And that's going to be a collection of a bunch of short stories, including a novella entitled Rattlesnakes that is a sequel of sorts to Cujo. So that's probably the one that's getting the most buzz, and there's going to be some republication of some of the shorts that he's put out in like the New Yorker and a few other spots over the last few years. But yeah, man.
Well, that one would technically be a part of a different tier list, the anthology tier list, right? Because none of
we
these
put
are
the anthologies on here.
Did we? Okay.
Let's double check because I believe we did.
All right, so let me switch.
Since it's been a minute since I've looked at this.
There we go.
Now I'm trying to remember. I guess we were doing just novels proper.
Yeah, we did novels.
It shows how it's been. It shows how it's been a minute since we've even looked at this, and so
yeah, we did a separate novella tier list.
Yeah, because I've always considered the novellas and then the short story collections. Anything that's not full length. King. I had forgotten that. So that needs to be a separate video then, doesn't it?
Yep.
Dang.
But that's not until this year, so we can worry about that later.
Yeah, damn. I was gonna say we should have combined that with this, but
oh, really? Well,
yeah, maybe.
Right.
Okay. Here we are, constant readers, doing this update, and so.
All right, so that means that we have to start with a book called Gwendy's Final Task.
Indeed, yeah. So this came out in February of 2022, and this is the conclusion of the Gwendy trilogy. Now, the thing you have to keep in mind, everybody, is that so the first book in this trilogy, which was Gwendy's Button Box, and I'm looking to see where I put that. I think it was a D. Yes, it was a D tier. And
you
that's
know where to look.
Yeah,
I love that. That's consistency.
Yeah. Well, because of the fact that I've not been the biggest fan of this particular character, and the fact that I felt like it was more so a Richard Chizmar thing, and as much as I love Cemetery Dance, I really feel like he's kind of taken King's friendship and used it to his own gain, at least to a degree. I mean, they put out, in my estimation, the best of the Stephen King. Shots fired, yeah. But I mean, I think they put out the most pristine deluxe editions of King stuff. They're still finishing out the Doubleday years, so they have The Stand is the most recent one that they have either completed, almost completed, something like that. But the It's deluxe edition that I have, which is incredible, one of my most valuable King books that I have. They do terrific work, and Richard Chizmar, it's his publisher and everything. But so King with Button Box had this idea, and he couldn't really get it off the ground, sent it over to Chiz, and Chizmar was like, okay, I have a way we can run with this. And then that book was okay. I mean, I might think of it more as a C at this particular point, but we're not rearranging, we're just throwing the new ones on.
We can rearrange.
Yeah. But there's a second book that came out, and it was called Gwendy's Magic Feather. And that one, King did not co-write. And that's where it became abundantly...
That's why that's not on this list,
exactly.
Right?
And that's why... That's where it became abundantly clear that this is much more so Richard Chizmar's series, almost like him playing in Stephen King's sandbox more so than like King having as much of an involvement as some people may think. And I really felt this with King even returning and having his name prominently displayed at the top of this book, as you guys can see here. Another thing, there is a Dark Tower that is on the cover of this, and so this ties in, and I'm not here to spoil stuff because I want you guys to read this, but this ties in with the tower.
Seems like you need to do an updated Dark Tower timeline video for
this is definitely one of those other worlds than these. It's a different level of the tower where this particular story takes place.
That's cool, though, but people love that.
Yeah, it does have the Tech Corporation is mentioned in this. There's Lowmen involved, but where this one lost me is it felt like they were like overstuffing the turkey with so many different things. So Gwendy, fast forward, so Gwendy starts out in the first book as a young girl, And she's grown up in Castle Rock, and she's gifted by Richard Ferris this small little button box, and it essentially has these different buttons and things that allow her to control the different continents, and it's essentially like holding the world in the palm of your hands, like God status sort of stuff. And so in the second book, Magic Feather, she has arisen, she's grown up, and she's in politics, comes back to Castle Rock, and she helps solve a murder mystery that's going on there. So her status is elevated, but it's a more simple, grounded story, kind of like the first one, in the fact that she goes back to Castle Rock, and it's a very condensed sort of story, a localized story. This one, on the other hand, she is of the highest order of public office. I can't remember if she's a U.S. representative or a congresswoman, or if she's part of the Senate. She's of that ilk. She's of that level, and she has a husband who has two she's lost, without getting into specifics, because that's where it ties in with the Tower a little bit, with who may or may not be responsible for what happened to her husband. And it's told in the time jump fashion, so when the book starts, she's about to go up into space. And she's the first, I'm trying to remember if it's a senator or a congresswoman. It's one of the two. But anyway, she's the first person of the highest public office to be going up into space. She's going, I think it's like 2029. She's going to this space station with a bunch of other prominent people, one of which is a Trump stand-in. And it's where, I'm a registered independent, so I don't really have like a horse in this particular political race. But I know, but King, as everybody who reads Stephen King and especially follows him on X, which is the artist formerly known as Twitter, knows that he is he's very blue, and he's very, very liberal, and much respect to his opinion, obviously, even if you don't completely agree with it all the time. But this is another one of the stories where his personal politics really seep into the storytelling significantly, and I know him and Chizmar have that sort of equal affiliation and mindset and everything. And I'm not saying it's bad or good, everybody, just to be plain and clear. But there is if you think the former president was cartoonized, this guy is that amplified, and he's somebody who is on this flight up to the space station with her, and he's in league with some of the bigger forces. I'm having to walk on eggshells because this really ties in with a lot of Tower stuff. But it just, I felt like there was too much going on in this. It's Chizmar playing in King's sandbox, man, and so he's just like, ooh, I wanna do that, and I wanna bring this in and bring that in, and I felt like it was too much, And I've grown to really appreciate the Gwendy character, and the ending is cathartic for what transpires with her. She's suffering from Alzheimer's in this, because at this point in time in the late 2020s, the story, the original one, Button Box, was in the 70s, and so she's old now. She's experiencing those health problems, and despite her political success, both locally back in Maine and also at the national level, she still has tragedy, the stuff with her husband and everything. So it's a book that I just feel like overstuffing the turkey, as I mentioned earlier. It's trying to do too many damn things between, tying in with the Tower and going up into space and destruction of the box, and Richard Ferris becoming more of a goodish kind of character as opposed to seemingly nefarious like in the first book. I mean, I don't know. I liked it more than Magic Feather, which Chizmar wrote solely by himself, but I guess it's going to be a D. It's not bad enough to be an F because of the fact that some of the Tower connections are intriguing, and I always like when books tie in to a degree. But I mean, stuff like which was a short story from, I believe, it was either Everything's Eventual or anyway, it was a King short story that tied in with the Tower. The title story itself, Everything's Eventual. Some of these other stories that were, just, I don't know, Tower side stories that didn't involve Roland and his Cotad or anything. I find modest merit in all of them. I've just never really been that on board with Gwendy, man. Everyone knows it's Gwendy. So, yeah, guys, this is, it's definitely, it's more of a D+, I guess, because of the Tower stuff. But, D, Dark Tower, it's really tough when you have to throw something with the affiliation into this particular tier. But, yeah, that's where I'm at. So, clear my throat.
What's this one right here?
That is Sleeping Beauties. So that is the book that he actually co-wrote with his son Owen.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah.
I was trying to find
Yep.
it because I need to move it.
Yeah,
Just,
so that one was adapted into a comic book recently that in some ways I thought was a little bit better than the book because it streamlined certain aspects and condensed it down to some of its most compelling. So that's the one where all of the women all across the world all start falling asleep, and they have these little cocoons that kind of form on their faces, and if you awaken them, they're basically like the crazies from Ramiro and from the Timothy Fantastic remake. So they're just these enraged, like, monstrous killers, kind of like Cell a little bit. So it was a little derivative, and King can be derivative of himself, I suppose, at times too. So
all right, so that leaves the next one, which is Fairy Tale.
speaking of derivative King, but not even so much derivative.
Snap.
Not even so much derivative of himself. This is something that I mentioned when we were filming the trailer reaction roundups today. Is there's that fine line between homage and ripoff, and so this is essentially. A lot of us thought that this was going to tie in with the tower. I'm not going to say one way or another whether it did or didn't. Explored similar themes or directly tied, but this is a story about a boy named Charlie. I think he's like 16, 17, something like that, and he has a mother who was killed by a drunk driver, and then the father falls into alcoholism himself, and with the depression and everything, and then ends up getting clean and sober. You're seeing a lot of King putting his life into it, getting hit by a vehicle, beating the alcoholism and being in AA, all these different things. But this is another one that it echoed not just a lot of King's previous things, but also this is essentially King and his buddy George R.R. Martin, him trying to do that sort of high fantasy kind of approach, because Charlie goes into another world. It's a high concept sort of fantasy world, a Dungeons and Dragons-y sort of place with wizards and knights and affected plagues across nations and kingdoms and things of that nature. You've got giants, you've got dungeons. I mean, all of that different stuff is heavily in play here. So you have the fish out of water aspect with the fact that Charlie goes down into this other world. It really echoed the Talisman a lot, which I much prefer the Talisman. And it also, King loves his relationships between, because his father left him, and so you can kind of see that he had that hollowness in his life, and so he likes writing these stories where there is an older dude who is almost like a fatherly figure to a younger kid, and in this case, a grandfatherly figure, which would be Hearts in Atlantis, which would be the recent Mr. Hardigan's Phone. A lot of things that King has done recently. Charlie as a character befriends this elderly dude who has this dog named Radar, and it's a German Shepherd, and my parents raised German Shepherds, love German Shepherds, and so he befriends this older guy, and turns out the older guy has basically the way for him to get into another world and experience all of the things of which he does. But once he gets over there, he meets a fractured kingdom, and there's a family of royalty, one of which has turned evil. The Flight Killer is like the new pseudo name of this evil sibling that's mucking everything up for the former rulers. And once he's over there, he gets locked in a dungeon, and there's this very lengthy, almost like training sequence for him to do these Hunger Games gladiatorial. So it's just it echoes so many other things that I'd seen from whether it was Game of Thrones, whether it was Hunger Games. All of these different recent things, I felt like almost like with the Institute, where it was like King was trying to do his own version of things that he had either done before or from other authors that he liked, and it felt a little subpar in my estimation. That's not to say that it didn't have some interesting moments, but it didn't go where I wanted it to go as far as expectations and whatnot. And I hate to use the term derivative once again, but this is another time where I was just kind of feeling that from King. Although it's not D tier for me. This is more like a C minus, honestly.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, because of the fact that I did still like the fantasy stuff, it just felt familiar to me. It felt like King doing his version of something else as opposed to just a very unique sort of thing. Since he's known for horror and drama and less for sci-fi and fantasy, this felt far less creative than another fantasy piece like The Eyes of the Dragon, which he had done previously, or any of his Dark Tower stuff. This felt much more like other authors and much less like his own take on it, and so That's why I was disappointed with this one. Like all of us constant readers, we were theorizing about connections with this book and what it could potentially tie into, or in this case the lack thereof. And so I guess the burden of expectation, my phrase that I love to do so goddamn much. This was very much one of those where I think I was expecting too much, and it just didn't end up being what I had hoped it to be, and that's fine. Hey, my favorite author he is more than welcome at this point in his esteemed career to do whatever the heck he wants. But yeah, that's how I feel about Fairy Tail. So Fairy Tail was released in September of 2022, and now
that leads us to Holly, the most recent release.
Indeed, the most recent release. And so, interestingly enough, as you guys saw, in 22, King put out 2 books, and in a lot of years, I mean, in 2021, he put out both Laird and Billy Summers. So a lot of the time, he'll drop
on the last one.
Yeah, he'll drop 2 books in a year. Yeah, in 23 he did not, and I'm assuming, I'm really hoping that's because he's going to drop 2 in 24. So we're going to have the You Like It Darker that I had mentioned already, and then we'll have something else later in the year, maybe September, October-ish. But Holly is one that I was a little ho-hum about when I initially heard, because I was like, another Holly story, because we already had, the Bill Hodges trilogy. So we had Mr. Mercedes, we had Finders Keepers, my favorite possibly, although that wavered a little bit with my recent reread leading up to the release of Holly.
End of Watch.
Yeah, End of Watch, which is the 3rd one. My least favorite of the 3, but one that I've kind of started to look at them as a cohesive unit, because I went back through all 3 of those. And then the 4th book with Holly was The Outsider, which was adapted
Which I remember you talking nicely about.
At the time.
Yeah.
On reread.
We liked the show.
The show was really good. Yeah, the show was really good. It was on HBO. Had Jason Bateman, Ben Mendelsohn, who is terrific.
Amazing.
As Ralph in that.
He's so good.
He's really, really good. I didn't like the take on Holly in that. I much preferred the take on Holly from the AT&T network series, and they repurposed it. It's on Peacock now. The one with Brendan Gleeson.
I've never seen that. Yeah.
Oh, that show is so awesome. Love that show. So, and then we had another Holly story, which was the title story of If It Bleeds, and as I noticed, that's not on this list either, because of the fact that it's a collection of novellas.
One,
yeah. So, yes, Holly. So we are talking the 6th story with Ms. Gibney, who has obviously become like King's favorite character to write at this particular point, and I think it's because she embodies a lot of his same, like, affinities, eccentricities. She's kind of neurotic, she's a little ADD, but she loves classic cinema, Godfather, and like she loves fast food, and I mean she's a very amusing character despite her neuroticisms. And this is one where I actually, upon further thought, after reading it for the 2nd time, because I like to read and then I like to listen after, and so I've gone through this book twice since it came out in September, and I like the fact that it did something a little bit different, not so much with Holly, but with the adversary, and with the villainous presence in this. And all I have to say for anybody who has actually read this book, because I'm not going to spoil anything, it gets really dark with what the villainous presence is doing in this, and Elf Parfaits is all that I'm going to say.
Okay.
And anybody who has read the book knows what I am talking about. So I actually really liked the villainous presence in this book. And I also really liked the fact that we explored Holly's backstory a little bit more. The complex relationship with her mother that she very obviously has, because at the very beginning of the book, so this isn't super spoiler, her mother dies of COVID.
Okay.
And so it's once again King putting his own personal politics into the book, but I didn't feel like it was anywhere near as heavy-handed in comparison with something like Gwendy's Final Task. This felt a little more organic and also in line with how Holly's already been presented as a person anyway. So her viewpoint on things like masking and all that, because it takes place during the back end of all of the nastiness we encountered in 2020. And so yeah, great villainous presence in this. I just really like the characters of Jerome, his sister Barbara. I like what happens with Barbara and her budgeting career, same with her brother in this, and burgeoning career. And also the fact that you actually you kind of know where I'm going with it at this point.
It feels like it's a B.
It is definitely a B. I wouldn't go as far as like B+, but upon the first read, I was thinking it was more in the C territory. But really, especially, it's really the fact that King hasn't written this kind of adversarial opposition before, and you notice I'm dancing around because I really want people who read this book to go in as blind as possible. He had an excerpt from this, which was in Entertainment Weekly, and it gave an impression as to who the villains were, but it didn't give the nature as to what they were doing.
Okay.
And I theorized about half right, but I was only half right. So yeah, it was darkly comedic. It was very well written, and I do like the character of Holly. I would like him to do other things and maybe come back to her after a little while, but yeah, she's his Sherlock Holmes at this point, man, and he just loves writing her.
It's not it's not Flag, is it?
No. No, this is one that is very much not tied. I was hoping it might tie in with other stuff. This is very much, it's on an island with the other Holly stories.
Okay.
So.
All right.
So
well, there you go.
So it's helpful if you've read. So with Holly, just to preface it properly, that you will get a lot more out of Holly if you have read the Hodges trilogy, if you've read The Outsider, because there are references to those books in this. But yeah, I guess you could enjoy it by itself because of the fact that the aforementioned villainous presence does not connect, with the other books. It's a new sort of adversarial thing going down. So yeah, I actually, the more I've thought about it, man, I really dug Holly, and yeah, happy holidays, happy New Year, everybody.
All right, so that is the through 2023 update for the Stephen King novel tier list ranking here on the Horror Show channel, aka Hail to Stephen King.
Yeah, I didn't give my full introduction this time, but that's because it's been dividing its time between in Fuego-tainment since the new year,
You've just
and I
been
went
such
back
a busy
to school.
dude.
Yeah. Going back to Arizona State, I think I've only done like maybe 4 or 5 Hail episodes in the last year. Unfortunately,
that's why I think people like to see these when they pop up, and I wanted to do an update. And if 2024 has just the anthology update, we can just do an episode updating that tier list, because that's a whole separate one.
I had completely forgotten that we didn't do the anthologies and the novellas, man. So that's...
No, we did in a separate tier list.
Oh, okay, we did.
We did, yeah. That's a separate tier list. That's what I'm saying. We have to add it to it.
As now I look right here, the novel tier list. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
For Hail proper, I was planning to do because we're going to do a countdown of the television series and the television movies, and then we were going to jump over and do a tier of that too. But that is the arduous task of going back through all the mini series because there's so many.
You got to make sure you're writing notes.
Storm of the Century, Rose Red, lesser things like Diary of Ellen Rimbauer. I mean, there's so much out there, with regards to all of the King stuff and King adjacent stuff too.
People love it when you're ready to do it, though.
Yeah, damn right. Well, I'm say thank you. I'm always appreciative for everybody who likes hearing me ramble about El Rey. So,
so thank you guys very much for watching. Until next time, I've been Cecil Laird, and then Fuego, you finish it out.
So I extend a grande gracias. Constant readers and viewers alike say thank you. I'm thankful we got to share this palaver today. Hoping it happens again sooner rather than later. And until then, remember, stay scared. And in this instance, read Stephen King. And I guess the big recommendation here of the 3 is Holly.
There you go.
Yeah.
Later, y'all.
Peace.